The special master appointed to review documents seized by the FBI from Mar-a-Lago held his first hearing today.
In preparation, Judge Dearie asked the Justice Department and former President Trump's legal team to submit agenda items ahead of the meeting. During the meeting, the judge questioned Trump's lawyers on their request to delay disclosing information regarding the declassification of documents. Judge Dearie has until November 30th to complete his review of the evidence collected at the former president's Florida estate.
CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us now from Washington for more on this. Catherine, great to see you. We know that the deliberations, as they've been underway, have included the judge having some questions, having some concerns. What do we know at this stage about how the judge himself, the special master, sees the task ahead of him?
Well, Lana and Errol, what the hearing did today is try and come up with what's called a case management plan. In layman's terms, it's a roadmap for the special master to review the more than 11,000 documents as ordered by federal Judge Cannon. But what we learned in the hearing today is that there's already a major sticking point over this issue of classification. Judge Dearie told the Trump legal team that, quote, you can't have your cake and eat it too, because earlier in the hearing, they had said, we don't want to kind of put our cards on the table about classification right now. We don't want to say these records were declassified, these records were not. And the judge said, well, how am I supposed to review records if I can't even have that as a starting point? And one of former President Trump's lawyers suggested that Judge Dearie was sort of overstepping the requirements that had laid out by the federal court, and he seemed to take sort of insult to that allegation. So what we're seeing already is this issue of classification is front and center, even to just get this review by the special master out of the gates. And we saw from the judge, he wants to do this in a very timely manner. He wants to move, expeditiously over the next couple of weeks to meet this November 30th deadline.
And Catherine, Judge Dearie was the person put forward by the Trump legal team and signed off on by the Justice Department. Given that it sounds like he took umbrage with what they said, that the fact that they're not replying to his request to try and better understand what was classified, what was declassified, what is the legal strategy, and is the Trump legal team potentially running afoul of the special master that they asked for?
Well, in this particular case, we had a filing just before the hearing where the Trump legal team said, Special Master Dearie, we don't want to get into issues of classification because, number one, we think it's premature. We might be willing to have a discussion about that when we get to the point where you are deciding what records were improperly seized by the FBI and should be returned to former President Trump. And then second, and most importantly, they said, we don't really want to get into this because this potentially could be part of a defensive legal strategy if charges are ultimately brought. And in simple terms, what they're saying is we don't want to commit to a position right now about what records the former president declassified and which ones maybe he didn't, because 6 months or a year from now, we may see the picture a little differently as his defense team. So it's hard to see how Judge Dearie is going to reconcile these two positions. He says, I'm supposed to look at these records. I'm supposed to decide what's classified, what's sort of in and what's out. But I can't even, as a basic starting point, find out from you, the Trump legal team, whether he did, in fact, declassify a lot of these records as far as he is concerned.
So complicated, too, because what the former president has said on social media, what he has said in public, is not necessarily what his legal team is saying now.
And that's really the point. At no stage has what the president has said in public, I declassified some of these documents, has that argument been made in a court of law. So crucial for this judge to get to the bottom of that very basic fact. Meanwhile, Catherine, the DOJ is appealing part of another judge's order that paused their review of the documents seized. What's the latest on that?
You almost need a whiteboard, like a legal whiteboard, to keep track of all of these cases. I think of it this way. There are sort of multiple legal tracks, and the trains are kind of moving down in a parallel fashion. We've just had this hearing in the New York court, and then we have this appeal in the 11th Circuit. This is the circuit based in Atlanta, and the Justice Department, as Errol pointed out, wants to get that court to step in and say the federal judge in Florida was wrong to kind of pause the FBI and Justice Department's ability to review the records seized at Mar-a-Lago as part of their criminal investigation. And in fact, that came up today with Judge Dearie. He said to the head of the Counterintelligence Division, Jay Bratt, what are you going to do if the 11th Circuit, that appeals court, does not step in? And he said, and I think this is very significant, he said, we're going to, or we should consider other appellate options. Now, they're not a lot of appellate options beyond the 11th Circuit. The initial hearing is with a small group of judges. If they decided to appeal that finding, then it goes to what they call en banc, which is, the entire court. And then after that, it's the Supreme Court. So already in that hearing in New York today, we had a Justice Department official say, we're going to go the distance on this. If we don't like the results we're getting, we may go to a higher or even the highest court.
Right, it very well may end up there. Catherine, I was watching our editorial notes from the team. I was personally surprised by how quickly this all wrapped up. Can you tell us anything more just about whether this was all as expected?
Someone like Judge Dearie is an experienced jurist, and my experience being in a courtroom with someone who's had decades of experience is that they really move at a lightning clip. They move through issues, they make decisions, and then they move forward. So the length of this sort of hearing to come up with a roadmap, the fact that it was only about 45 minutes did not surprise me in the least. If he had sort of disagreements with the one legal team in particular, the Trump legal team, he sort of had the agreement and then he moved on to the next point. So these are very sharp, very efficient jurists and great decision makers. I mean, the kind of person you want on your team in a lot of ways. I mean, really good, decisive people. We'll have to see now what plan he comes up with that could ultimately be acceptable to both parties, and whether that's going to be in keeping with what the federal judge in Florida, Judge Cannon, has required them to do. And I say that because they're already arguing over the language in her order. Like, what exactly did she mean, and how far did she envision the special master going in terms of these issues of classification? So it is just, maybe this isn't the best term, but it feels a little bit like a hot legal mess, right? It's going to be fascinating, and it's going to be lengthy.
If Catherine Herridge calls it a hot legal mess, that's something.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
Thanks,
You're
Catherine.
welcome.